The November rain hammered against the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Cathedral as my stepmother Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers gripped the mahogany podium. Her voice, amplified by the cathedral sound system, carried across the sea of black-clad mourners with crystalline clarity. Richard Thompson built more than just a telecommunications empire, she declared, her blonde hair immaculately styled despite the weather outside. She built a legacy of excellence, dedication, and unwavering commitment to family values. He understood that success requires sacrifice, discipline, and the wisdom to surround yourself with people who share your vision for greatness. I sat in the third row, feeling the familiar sting of exclusion as Victoria's gaze swept over the assembled crowd of business leaders, politicians, and society figures. My simple black dress from Target felt inadequate among the designer mourning attire that surrounded me, but it was the best I could afford on my teacher's salary. Victoria's speech continued with practiced precision, each word carefully chosen to reinforce the narrative that had defined our family for the past 8 years since she'd married my father. Richard's greatest pride was watching his children embrace the values he held dear. He often spoke about the importance of building something meaningful, something that would endure beyond our individual lives. My brother Marcus shifted in the front row, his expensive charcoal suit perfectly tailored to his tall frame. At 34, he had inherited Dad's commanding presence and business acumen, serving as vice president of operations at Thomson Communications while living in a penthouse apartment in downtown Chicago. His wife Jennifer, a former Miss Illinois turned corporate lawyer, sat beside him with their twin daughters, both dressed in matching black velvet dresses that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Richard believed deeply in meritocracy, Victoria continued, her voice caking on a tone of gentle condescension that I recognized all too well. He understood that true success comes from making difficult choices, from prioritizing long-term impact over short-term comfort, and from having the courage to pursue excellence even when others choose easier paths. The words hit me like physical blows. Everyone in that cathedral knew exactly who Victoria was referring to when she spoke about easier paths and short-term comfort. For the past 6 years, I had been the family disappointment, the daughter who had thrown away a full scholarship to Northwestern's business program to pursue elementary education instead. My sister Brooke, seated in the second row next to her husband David, a successful orthodontist, nodded approvingly at Victoria's speech. At 29, Brooke had followed the predetermined path of success, graduating magna cum laude from Northwestern, earning her MBA from Kellogg, and taking a position as marketing director at Thomson Communications. She lived in a sprawling suburban mansion in Winnetka, drove a white BMW, and had already produced 2 grandchildren for Dad to dote on. I was 32 years old and taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary School in one of Chicago's most challenging neighborhoods. My students came from families struggling with poverty, immigration issues, and the daily reality of living in underserved communities. While my siblings accumulated wealth and status symbols, I spent my days helping 8-year-olds learn to read, mediating conflicts over lunch money, and staying late to tutor kids whose parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. The financial contrast between my life and my siblings' lives was stark and unavoidable. Marcus lived in a $2 million penthouse with panoramic views of Lake Michigan. Brooke's house in Winnetka had been featured in Chicago Magazine's Homes of Distinction issue. Meanwhile, I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Logan Square, drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a dented bumper, and carefully planned my grocery shopping around sales and coupons. But the economic disparity was nothing compared to the emotional distance that had grown between us over the years. Family gatherings had become exercises in polite exclusion, where conversations revolved around quarterly earnings, investment portfolios, and business strategies that I couldn't contribute to meaningfully. My stories about breakthrough moments with struggling students or innovative teaching methods were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. Victoria's voice rose slightly as she approached the climax of her eulogy. Richard's vision will continue through those who truly understood what he was building, through those who made the sacrifices necessary to be worthy of his legacy. The implication was unmistakable. In Victoria's carefully constructed narrative, worthiness was measured by bank account balances and corporate titles. Success meant following the path that Dad had laid out, accumulating wealth and influence within the family business empire he had spent 40 years building from a small telecommunications repair shop into a multinational corporation worth over $200 million. As Victoria concluded her speech and returned to her seat in the front row, I felt the familiar weight of judgment from the assembled mourners. Extended family members, business associates, and longtime friends all shared the same understanding about the Thompson family hierarchy. Marcus was the heir apparent, destined to take control of the company and continue building the empire. Brooke was the marketing genius, brilliant at expanding brand recognition and customer loyalty. Victoria was the elegant hostess who maintained the family's social connections and philanthropic reputation. And I was disappointed. The daughter who had inexplicably chosen to work with those people in struggling neighborhoods instead of contributing to the family's continued success. The one who had rejected every opportunity to join the business, who declined invitations to networking events, and who seemed content to live paycheck to paycheck while helping other people's children instead of building something meaningful for herself. Father Michael stepped to the podium to deliver the final blessing, his gentle voice a stark contrast to Victoria's authoritative presentation. But even his words about charity, service, and helping the less fortunate felt like subtle criticism of my choices. In the context of this gathering, surrounded by Chicago's business and social elite, my dedication to public education seemed naive and impractical rather than noble. The funeral service concluded with a processional that reflected our family's social stratification. Victoria led the way, followed by Marcus and Jennifer with their daughters, then Brooke and David with their children. I walked alone, several steps behind, feeling like a distant relative rather than Dad's eldest daughter. The cemetery service was held at Graceland Cemetery, where Chicago's most prominent families had been buried for over a century. Dad's plot was located in a section reserved for business leaders and philanthropists, marked by an imposing granite monument that proclaimed the Thompson family's lasting contribution to the city's development. As we gathered around the casket, Victoria positioned herself prominently beside Father Michael, while Marcus and Brooke flanked her on either side. Their children stood in a perfect line, creating a tableau of family solidarity and shared grief. I found myself standing slightly apart, positioned behind a marble angel statue that seemed to symbolize my peripheral status within the family constellation. The November wind whipped across the cemetery grounds, carrying the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter. Victoria's coat was clearly designer, probably Burberry, while Brooke wore what looked like Armani. My own coat, purchased 3 years earlier at Marshall's, felt thin and inadequate against the bitter Chicago weather. As Father Michael began the graveside prayers, I caught fragments of whispered conversations from the business associates and family friends who had followed the processional to the cemetery. The Thompson Communications succession plan was apparently a topic of considerable interest among Chicago's business community. Everyone seemed to understand that Marcus would soon be named CEO, with Brooke taking on expanded marketing responsibilities and Victoria maintaining her role as the family's social and philanthropic representative. Nobody mentioned my potential role in the family business, because nobody expected me to have one. My choice to pursue teaching had been interpreted as a rejection of everything the Thompson family represented. My decision to work in challenging neighborhoods had been seen as a phase that I would eventually outgrow once I realized the practical limitations of trying to save the world one student at a time. The graveside service concluded with Father Michael's final blessing and the traditional throwing of dirt onto the casket. Victoria performed this ritual with graceful solemnity, followed by Marcus and Brooke, who each took their turn with practiced dignity. When my turn came, I stepped forward and let the cold earth fall from my fingers, whispering a private goodbye to the man who had built an empire, but had never understood why his eldest daughter chose to measure success differently than he did. As the gathering began to disperse, with clusters of mourners offering final condolences to Victoria and making plans for the reception at the Chicago Club, I realized that this moment marked more than just Dad's death. It represented the final confirmation of everything our family had believed about success, failure, and who deserved to inherit the fruits of a lifetime's work. In less than 3 hours, when the family attorney read Dad's will in the oak-paneled conference room of Mitchell, Hayes & Associates, every assumption underlying this carefully orchestrated display of family hierarchy would be revealed as spectacularly, irrevocably wrong. But for now, I stood alone in the November wind, letting my family's expectations wash over me like rain, completely unaware that everything they thought they knew about Richard Thompson's final wishes was about to change forever. Richard Thompson hadn't been born into wealth. The empire that now commanded respect throughout Chicago's business community had originated in a cramped basement workshop on the South Side, where a 23-year-old electronics technician with calloused hands and ambitious dreams began repairing television sets and radio equipment for his working-class neighbors. In the year was 1978, and cable television was transforming how Americans consumed entertainment. While larger corporations focused on major metropolitan installations, Dad recognized an opportunity in the overlooked markets, small businesses, apartment complexes, and residential areas that the big players considered too labor-intensive or insufficiently profitable to pursue aggressively. Thompson Communications started with Dad's technical expertise, a borrowed pickup truck, and an absolute determination to outwork every competitor in the city. He spent 18-hour days crawling through building basements, climbing telephone poles, and troubleshooting signal issues that other technicians couldn't solve. His reputation for reliability and innovative problem-solving spread through word-of-mouth recommendations, and within 3 years he had hired his first employee. My mother, Patricia, had been his bookkeeper in those early days. She possessed the organizational skills and financial acumen that complemented Dad's technical brilliance, transforming his scattered invoices and cash payments into systematic business records that enabled strategic growth planning. They married in 1982, combining their complementary skills into a partnership that extended far beyond romance into genuine business collaboration. The 1980s telecommunications boom had been perfectly timed for Thompson Communications' expansion. As businesses throughout Chicago upgraded their communication systems and residential customers demanded more sophisticated cable and internet services, Dad's company evolved from a small repair operation into a comprehensive telecommunications contractor serving major corporate clients. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The defining moment came in 1987 when Thompson Communications won the contract to install the communications infrastructure for Chicago's newly constructed Millennium Business Complex. The project required coordinating between 17 different contractors, managing a timeline that demanded precision execution, and delivering results that met the exacting standards of Fortune 500 companies relocating their regional headquarters to the development. Dad had mortgaged everything, the house, the business equipment, even Mom's engagement ring, to secure the bonding requirements for the contract. For 8 months, our family lived on ramen noodles and generic cereal, while every available dollar was invested in equipment, personnel, and the quality control measures necessary to exceed client expectations. The gamble succeeded spectacularly. Thompson Communications completed the Millennium Project 3 weeks ahead of schedule and 15% under budget, establishing Dad's reputation as a contractor who could deliver complex installations that other companies couldn't handle. The success generated referrals that led to contracts with major corporations throughout the Midwest, transforming the company from a local operation into a regional powerhouse. Marcus had been born in 1989, during the company's rapid expansion phase. From his earliest memories, he had been surrounded by the excitement of business growth,
accompanying Dad to construction sites where massive telecommunications installations were reshaping Chicago's skyline. He understood intuitively that the family's increasing prosperity was directly connected to Dad's business success. Brooke arrived 2 years later, followed by me in 1991. By then, Thomson Communications employed over 40 people and operated from a modern facility in Schaumburg that featured state-of-the-art testing equipment and a fleet of service vehicles emblazoned with the company logo. My earliest childhood memories were shaped by the rhythm of Dad's business success. Family dinners revolved around discussions of quarterly projections, new contract negotiations, and strategic planning for market expansion. Weekend activities often included visits to job sites, where Dad would explain the technical complexities of fiber optic installations, while Marcus absorbed every detail with genuine fascination. The family's lifestyle evolved dramatically throughout the 1990s. We moved from our modest bungalow in Arlington Heights to a sprawling colonial mansion in Barrington Hills, where Dad could entertain corporate clients in an environment that reflected Thomson Communications' growing market position. The new house featured a home office with multiple phone lines, a conference room for business meetings, and a 3-car garage that housed Dad's expanding collection of luxury vehicles. Victoria entered our family story in 2003, 6 years after Mom's death from ovarian cancer. She had been a marketing consultant hired to develop Thomson Communications' first comprehensive advertising campaign, tasked with expanding the company's brand recognition beyond the referral networks that had sustained its growth for 2 decades. At 38, Victoria possessed the sophisticated marketing expertise and social connections that Dad recognized as essential for elevating Thomson Communications from a successful regional contractor to a nationally recognized telecommunications company. Her background included previous work with major Chicago advertising agencies and an MBA from University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. But Victoria brought more than professional qualifications to her relationship with Dad. She understood the social dynamics of Chicago's business community in ways that Dad, despite his commercial success, had never fully mastered. Her family had been part of Chicago society for 3 generations, providing her with natural access to country club networks, charitable organizations, and informal business relationships that could accelerate Thomson Communications' growth. The marriage in 2005 marked Thomson Communications' transformation from a family business into a corporate entity with aspirations for national expansion. Victoria's marketing strategies repositioned the company as a premium telecommunications contractor specializing in complex installations for Fortune 500 clients. Her social connections generated contract opportunities that had previously been inaccessible to a company without established relationships in Chicago's business elite. Marcus embraced this evolution enthusiastically. After graduating from Northwestern with a degree in electrical engineering, he joined Thomson Communications as a project manager, bringing both technical competence and genuine passion for the business expansion that Victoria's strategies were facilitating. His understanding of emerging technologies, combined with natural leadership abilities, made him Dad's obvious choice for increasing operational responsibilities. Brooke's path into the family business had been more circuitous, but equally successful. Her undergraduate degree from Northwestern was in communications, followed by the MBA from Kellogg that provided her with sophisticated understanding of brand management and customer relationship strategies. Her marketing campaigns for Thomson Communications had been featured in industry publications as examples of how regional contractors could compete effectively against national corporations.
The company's growth trajectory throughout the 2000s and 2010s reflected the successful integration of Dad's technical expertise, Victoria's strategic marketing, Marcus's operational management, and Brooke's brand development. Annual revenues increased from $20 million in 2005 to over $80 million by 2020, with expansion into telecommunications consulting, smart building technologies, and corporate IT infrastructure management. This remarkable success story created powerful expectations about family roles and individual contributions to collective achievement. Marcus was positioned as the natural successor to Dad's leadership role, having demonstrated both technical competence and business acumen through his management of increasingly complex projects. Brooke's marketing innovations had directly contributed to revenue growth and market expansion, establishing her value as an essential component of the company's continued success. Victoria's role as the family's social and philanthropic representative had elevated Thomson Communications' standing within Chicago's business community while creating opportunities for contract negotiations and partnership development that pure technical competence couldn't access. Her annual charity galas raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for various causes while strengthening business relationships that translated into contract opportunities. Within this carefully constructed ecosystem of family business success, my decision to pursue elementary education instead of joining Thomson Communications had been interpreted as rejection of everything the family had built together. My choice to work in challenging neighborhoods serving low-income students seemed to contradict the values of excellence, strategic thinking, and wealth accumulation that had enabled our family's remarkable transformation from working-class origins to upper-class prosperity. Family gatherings had become increasingly uncomfortable as my siblings' contributions to business success were celebrated, while my teaching career was politely ignored or gently criticized as a phase that I would eventually outgrow. The assumption was that once I experienced the practical limitations of trying to make a difference through public education, I would recognize the wisdom of applying my skills to something more financially rewarding and socially prestigious. But the foundation of these assumptions was far more fragile than anyone in my family suspected. While they had been building their business empire and accumulating the external markers of success, I had been pursuing a completely different kind of achievement that none of them understood or valued. The family hierarchy that seemed so solid and permanent was about to be revealed as based on incomplete information about what Dad actually valued most in his final years. What my family didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined during all those years of polite disappointment and gentle criticism, was that my decision to become an elementary school teacher had been the foundation for something far more significant than anyone suspected. While they assumed I was wasting my potential on a modest career helping other people's children, I had actually been building an educational innovation empire that was reshaping how vulnerable students learned and succeeded. The transformation began during my second year at Lincoln Elementary, when I realized that traditional teaching methods were failing catastrophically for students dealing with poverty, language barriers, and unstable home environments. Standardized curricula designed for middle-class suburban students couldn't address the complex challenges facing kids who arrived at school hungry, exhausted from caring for younger siblings, or struggling to learn English while helping their parents navigate immigration paperwork. Rather than accepting these limitations as inevitable, I had spent my evenings and weekends developing alternative teaching approaches that integrated technology, community resources, and individualized learning plans. My small apartment in Logan Square had become a research laboratory where I tested educational games, developed multilingual learning materials, and created assessment tools that measured student progress more accurately than standardized tests. The breakthrough came when I discovered that many of my struggling students were actually brilliant problem solvers who learned differently than traditional educational systems recognized. 8-year-old Miguel, who couldn't sit still during conventional reading lessons, demonstrated exceptional spatial intelligence when I introduced learning games that allowed him to manipulate virtual objects while practicing vocabulary. Sarah, whose limited English had labeled her as developmentally delayed, revealed sophisticated mathematical reasoning when I created bilingual word problems that connected to her family's restaurant business. These individual successes led me to develop what I privately called the Adaptive Learning Protocol, a comprehensive system that combined technological tools, community partnerships, and family engagement strategies to create personalized education plans for each student. Instead of trying to force diverse learners into standardized approaches, my system adapted to their unique strengths, challenges, and cultural backgrounds. The technological component required skills that my family would have been shocked to discover I possessed. Using programming knowledge I had acquired through online courses and weekend workshops, I created interactive learning applications that could adjust difficulty levels in real time based on student responses.
These weren't simple educational games, but sophisticated adaptive systems that used machine learning algorithms to optimize content delivery for individual learning styles. My evenings were spent coding, testing, and refining applications that could teach reading comprehension through interactive storytelling, mathematics through virtual manipulatives, and science concepts through augmented reality experiments. By my fourth year of teaching, I had developed over 30 different educational applications that could be customized for students with varying ability levels, language backgrounds, and learning preferences. But technology alone couldn't address the broader challenges facing my students. Many came from families struggling with poverty, immigration issues, or social services complications that affected their ability to focus on learning. Traditional parent-teacher conferences couldn't bridge the cultural and linguistic gaps that prevented effective homeschool collaboration.
I began developing community partnership networks that connected families with resources they needed while creating opportunities for parents to contribute their own expertise to their children's education. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son struggled with reading, became my Spanish language liaison, helping other immigrant families navigate school communications. Mr. Washington, an unemployed construction worker whose daughter excelled in my mathematics games, volunteered to teach hands-on engineering projects that made abstract concepts tangible for kinesthetic learners. These partnerships evolved into a comprehensive support system that addressed not just academic challenges, but the social and economic barriers that prevented students from reaching their potential. I coordinated with local healthcare providers to ensure students received vision and hearing screenings that might reveal undiagnosed learning obstacles. I partnered with food banks and clothing drives to address basic needs that affected classroom performance. I even developed relationships with immigration attorneys who could provide pro bono assistance for families dealing with documentation issues. The results were extraordinary. Within 3 years, students in my classroom were achieving reading and mathematics scores that exceeded district averages, despite coming from demographics that were traditionally considered at risk. More importantly, they were developing confidence, curiosity, and problem-solving skills that prepared them for long-term academic success. Word of these achievements began spreading through educational networks beyond Lincoln Elementary. Dr. Rachel Martinez, a researcher at the University of Illinois Chicago's College of Education, contacted me after hearing about my students' test score improvements and innovative teaching methods. She requested permission to observe my classroom and document the strategies I was using. Dr. Martinez's initial visit led to a formal research collaboration that would change everything. She recognized that my adaptive learning protocol represented a breakthrough in personalized education that could benefit struggling students throughout the country. With her academic credentials and research expertise, combined with my practical classroom innovations, we could develop a scalable model for educational transformation. Our partnership resulted in a comprehensive study published in the Journal of Educational Innovation that documented how technology-enhanced, culturally responsive teaching methods could dramatically improve outcomes for underserved student populations. The research attracted attention from education policymakers, technology companies, and philanthropic organizations interested in supporting proven approaches to educational equity. The Gates Foundation contacted us 6 months after the study's publication, offering a planning grant to develop a pilot program that could test our methods across multiple schools and demographics. The initial grant of $150,000 allowed us to hire additional researchers, develop more sophisticated technological tools, and create training materials for other educators who wanted to implement similar approaches. But the real transformation occurred when I was invited to present our research at the National Education Technology Conference in Denver. My presentation, titled Adaptive Learning Protocols, Technology and Community Partnerships for Educational Equity, was attended by over 800 educators, researchers, and education technology entrepreneurs. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within weeks of the conference, I received inquiries from school districts in 12 states interested in piloting our methods. Technology companies wanted to license our adaptive learning applications. University education departments requested partnerships for teacher training programs. Educational consultants offered to help us scale our approaches nationally. But more importantly, several venture capital firms specializing in education technology had identified our work as representing the future of personalized learning. They weren't interested in traditional educational products that simply digitized existing curricula, but in transformative approaches that could address the systemic challenges preventing millions of students from reaching their potential. The culmination came 8 months before Dad's death, when we received notification that the Adaptive Learning Protocol had been selected for a $3.2 million implementation grant from the Department of Education's Educational Innovation and Research Program. The grant would fund a 3-year study involving 25 schools across 5 states, with the goal of developing replicable models for educational transformation that could benefit over 10,000 students. By the time of Dad's funeral, our pilot programs were operating in schools throughout Illinois, Ohio, Texas, California, and New York. The preliminary results showed consistent improvements in student engagement, academic achievement, and long-term educational outcomes. Teachers trained in our methods reported higher job satisfaction and renewed enthusiasm for their profession. Parents described increased involvement in their children's education and improved communication with schools. But perhaps most significantly, technology companies and education publishers were beginning to recognize that our community-centered, culturally responsive approach represented a fundamental shift in how educational innovation should be designed and implemented. Instead of creating products for educators to use, we had developed methods that empowered educators to create solutions that worked for their specific student populations. The financial implications were staggering. Conservative estimates suggested that scaling our approaches nationally could generate revenues exceeding $50 million annually through licensing agreements, consulting contracts, and technology partnerships. Educational consultants had valued our intellectual portfolio at over $15 million, with projections for exponential growth as school districts nationwide faced increasing pressure to address achievement gaps and improve outcomes for underserved students.
None of my family knew any of this. While they had been measuring my worth through salary comparisons and lifestyle assessments, I had been building something that was attracting national attention and generating opportunities they couldn't have imagined. The daughter they considered a well-meaning failure was actually pioneering innovations that were reshaping American education while creating intellectual property worth millions of dollars. The secret work that filled my evenings and weekends had positioned me as a recognized expert in educational technology and equity, with a professional network that included university researchers, government officials, philanthropists, and technology entrepreneurs. But Dad's final decision would soon reveal that he had been far more aware of these achievements than anyone suspected. The law offices of Mitchell, Hayes & Associates occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Willis Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering commanding views of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline that Dad had helped modernize through decades of telecommunications infrastructure projects. The conference room where we gathered at 3 p.m. was designed to impress, featuring a marble table that could seat 20 people, original oil paintings of Chicago's founding fathers, and leather-bound law books that lined mahogany shelves from floor to ceiling. Victoria arrived first, having spent the intervening hours at the Chicago Club reception, accepting condolences from business associates and family friends. Her black Chanel suit remained impeccable despite the emotional strain of the day, and her makeup had been carefully refreshed to maintain the composed appearance that had become her signature during 8 years as the Thompson family matriarch. Marcus and Jennifer followed closely behind, both carrying leather portfolios that suggested they had come prepared for detailed discussions about business succession planning and asset management. Marcus wore the same charcoal suit from the funeral, but had changed into a burgundy tie that conveyed business authority rather than mourning. Jennifer's sleek black dress was appropriate for both funeral attendance and corporate meetings, reflecting her dual role as family member and legal counsel. Brooke and David completed our immediate family group, with Brooke clutching a manila folder that likely contained financial documents and succession planning materials she had prepared over the past months. Her organizational skills had always been legendary within the family, and she approached major life events with the same systematic preparation that made her marketing campaign so successful. I sat at the far end of the table, feeling underdressed and unprepared compared to my siblings' obvious readiness for what they assumed would be a straightforward transfer of business assets and family wealth. My simple black dress and minimal makeup seemed appropriate for mourning a father, but inadequate for a business meeting that would determine the future control of a multi-million-dollar corporation. James Mitchell, Dad's attorney for over 15 years, entered the conference room carrying several sealed envelopes and a thick document bound in navy blue leather. At 68, Mitchell possessed the dignified gravitas that came from handling estate planning for Chicago's wealthiest families, and his expression revealed nothing about the contents of Dad's final will. "Thank you all for gathering during such a difficult time," Mitchell began, settling into his chair at the head of the table with a practiced ceremony. Richard was very specific about his wishes regarding today's proceedings. He requested that I read his will in its entirety, including several explanatory letters, before taking any questions or discussing implementation details. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her attention completely focused on Mitchell's careful pronunciation. The preliminary bequest would likely be generous but predictable: charitable donations, gifts to longtime employees, perhaps some provision for extended family members. The real interest lay in the major asset distributions that would determine control of Thomson Communications and the substantial investment portfolio Dad had accumulated over 4 decades of business success. "Before beginning the formal document," Mitchell continued, "I want to share a personal letter that Richard wrote to me explaining his overall philosophy and decision-making process for this estate plan." He opened the first sealed envelope and removed a single sheet of Thomson Communications letterhead, bearing Dad's distinctive handwriting. The sight of Dad's personal stationery being used for estate planning communications created an atmosphere of heightened attention around the conference table. This wasn't just legal formality, but deeply personal communication from beyond the grave about family relationships and individual worth. "Dear James," Mitchell began reading, his voice carrying the formal tone required for such intimate revelations. "By the time you read this letter to my family, I will be gone and they will be learning information that may surprise them considerably. I want you to understand that every decision reflected in this will represents careful observation and evaluation of my children's characters, achievements, and values over many years." The opening paragraph created immediate tension as we processed the implication that Dad's estate decisions might deviate significantly from family expectations. Victoria's perfectly composed expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty, while Marcus and Brooke exchanged glances that suggested growing apprehension about what revelations might be coming. "I built Thomson Communications through hard work, innovative thinking, and willingness to take calculated risks based on evidence rather than assumptions," Mitchell continued reading. "In distributing my wealth, I have applied these same principles. My children have made very different choices about how to use their talents and opportunities, and those choices have revealed their true characters in ways that have fundamentally influenced my decisions about inheritance."
Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair as the letter's implications became clearer. This wouldn't be a routine transfer of business assets to the obvious successor, but rather a carefully considered evaluation of each family member's worthiness based on criteria that apparently went beyond traditional measures of business success. Mitchell opened the formal will document, and the rustling of pages echoed through the silent conference room like a countdown to revelation. The first several sections contain standard legal language about sound mind, revocation of previous wills, and appointment of executors. But as he reached the specific bequests, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. "To my wife, Victoria Catherine Thompson," Mitchell read in measured tones, "I leave the sum of $8 million, the residence at 1247 Sheridan Road in Winnetka, and a life income interest in the Thompson Family Trust, which will provide approximately $400,000 annually for her lifetime." Victoria's relief was visible as she processed this substantial but not unexpected inheritance. $8 million plus the family home and ongoing income represented generous provision for her future security while maintaining her lifestyle and social position within Chicago's elite circles. "To my son, Marcus Richard Thompson," Mitchell continued, "I leave the sum of $5 million and a 15% ownership stake in Thomson Communications, conditional upon his completion of a master's degree in education or social work within 5 years of my death." The silence that followed this announcement was deafening. Marcus stared at Mitchell with complete incomprehension, his mouth slightly open as he struggled to process the conditional nature of his inheritance and the requirement that seemed to contradict everything he had spent 15 years preparing for. "I'm sorry," Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Could you repeat the education requirement? I think I misunderstood something." Mitchell's expression remained professionally neutral as he repeated the clause verbatim. The 15% ownership stake represented significant value, but it was a minority interest that would provide income without control. More shocking was the education requirement that suggested Dad had concluded that Marcus needed different qualifications than business experience to deserve his inheritance. "To my daughter, Brooke Elizabeth Thompson Morrison," Mitchell read, "I leave the sum of $3 million and the vacation property in Door County, Wisconsin, along with all furnishings and recreational equipment." Brooke's face went pale as she realized her inheritance contained no ownership stake in Thompson Communications whatsoever. $3 million was certainly substantial, but it represented less than 1.5% of Dad's estimated total wealth. The vacation property was valuable, but secondary compared to the business empire she had expected to help control. "But what about the company?" Brooke asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. "What about Thompson Communications? What about my marketing position and the expansion plans I've been developing?" Jennifer, with her legal background, immediately grasped the implications. "Emily," she said slowly, "if you inherited the remainder of the estate, that means you own Thompson Communications. You're Marcus's boss now." Mathematical reality hit everyone simultaneously. The daughter they had dismissed as an idealistic failure had just inherited complete control of the family business empire, while the siblings who had spent years positioning themselves as natural successors received what amounted to generous but secondary bequests. Marcus began to cry, not the dignified tears of grief, but the raw, desperate sobs of someone whose entire identity and future had just been revealed as illusory. Everything he had worked for, planned for, and assumed was rightfully his had been given to the sister whose choices he had never understood or respected. "That's not possible," Victoria said, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she used when family situations required immediate correction. "Richard always said Marcus would take over the company. He's been grooming him for leadership for 15 years.
Mitchell opened another sealed envelope, this one addressed specifically to the family, in Dad's handwriting. "Richard anticipated your questions and prepared detailed explanations for his decisions. He specifically requested that I read these letters before discussing any legal challenges or implementation procedures." As he began reading Dad's personal explanation for the inheritance distribution, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the reality that I had just inherited not just my father's wealth, but his entire business empire. The teacher earning $45,000 annually had become the owner of a $200 million telecommunications corporation, while my family stared at me as if I had suddenly transformed into someone they had never seen before. The moment of revelation was complete, but the explanations that would shatter their understanding of Dad's priorities and my hidden achievements were still to come. Mitchell cleared his throat and opened the sealed envelope containing Dad's explanatory letter, his experienced hands steady despite the emotional chaos surrounding the conference table. The silence in the room was absolute. Not the respectful quiet of people listening carefully, but the shocked stillness that follows catastrophic news. "My dearest family," Mitchell began reading, in Dad's voice through his careful pronunciation, "I know that my inheritance decisions will come as a profound shock to most of you, and I want you to understand that these choices were not made impulsively or without deep consideration of each person's character, achievements, and potential for meaningful contribution to society." Victoria leaned forward, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the marble table, as she searched Dad's words for some explanation that might modify or contextualize the devastating distribution she had just heard. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't disguise the pallor that had replaced her composed confidence. "For the past 18 months," Mitchell continued, "I have been conducting a comprehensive evaluation of my children's life choices, professional accomplishments, and the values they demonstrate through their daily actions. This assessment was prompted by my growing awareness that true success cannot be measured simply through financial accumulation or business advancement. Marcus wiped his eyes with his suit sleeve, his corporate composure completely shattered. "What evaluation?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Dad never said anything about evaluating our choices. He always encouraged me to focus on the business, to prepare for taking over the company. Mitchell paused in his reading to address the interruption with professional patience. Richard requested that I complete the entire explanation before taking questions. He felt that understanding his full reasoning was essential for processing these decisions appropriately. The letter continued with Dad's detailed observations about each family member's approach to success and responsibility. Marcus's technical competence and business acumen were acknowledged respectfully, but Dad expressed concern about his narrow focus on profit maximization without consideration for broader social impact. His leadership style, while effective for managing existing operations, lacked the innovative thinking necessary for addressing the telecommunications industry's evolving challenges. Marcus has mastered the systems I created 20 years ago, but he has not demonstrated the visionary thinking required to adapt Thomson Communications for the future. His approach to business is fundamentally reactive rather than transformative, focused on optimizing existing processes rather than identifying new opportunities for meaningful innovation. Brooke's marketing brilliance was praised extensively, but Dad questioned whether her strategies genuinely served customer needs or simply manipulated consumer behavior to maximize revenue. Her campaigns had increased brand recognition and sales volume, but they hadn't created lasting value for the communities Thomson Communications served. Brooke possesses exceptional creative intelligence, but she has applied these gifts primarily to convince people to purchase services they may not need, rather than developing solutions that address genuine technological challenges facing modern businesses and communities. Victoria's contributions to the family's social positioning and philanthropic activities were acknowledged with gratitude, but Dad observed that her charity work seemed motivated more by networking opportunities and social status enhancement than by genuine commitment to helping vulnerable populations. Victoria has elevated our family's standing within Chicago's philanthropic community, but I have noticed that her charitable interests coincide remarkably closely with organizations that provide business networking opportunities rather than those that address the most pressing social needs in our city. Then Mitchell reached the section about me, and I felt the entire room's attention focus on my face as Dad's private assessment of my choices was revealed to my family for the first time. Emily, however, has spent the past 8 years demonstrating exactly the kind of innovative thinking, community commitment, and transformative impact that represents the future of meaningful achievement. Mitchell read, his voice carrying the weight of Dad's profound admiration. The letter detailed Dad's secret investigation into my education work, revealing a level of awareness about my professional accomplishments that stunned me completely. He knew about the adaptive learning protocol, the university research collaboration, the Gates Foundation funding, and the Department of Education grant. He somehow learned about my programming skills, my community partnership networks, and the national recognition my methods were receiving from education policy experts.
Through discrete inquiries and independent research, Mitchell read, I have discovered that Emily has created educational innovations that are being studied and implemented by school districts throughout the country. Her work represents exactly the kind of technological creativity and social responsibility that I believe should guide Thomson Communications' future development. Marcus stared at me with complete bewilderment. What educational innovations? You teach 4th grade at an elementary school. How could Dad know about research collaborations and federal grants that we've never heard about? I found myself in the surreal position of having to explain my secret professional achievements to family members who had dismissed my career for years. I've been developing adaptive learning technologies and community engagement strategies that help struggling students succeed, I began, my voice sounding strange in the formal conference room atmosphere. The work started in my classroom, but it's expanded into a comprehensive system that's being piloted in schools across 5 states. We've received over $3 million in federal funding to study and scale our approaches nationally. Jennifer's legal training kicked in as she processed the implications. Emily, are you saying you've built some kind of education technology company while working as a public school teacher? Not a company, exactly, but a research and development initiative that's created intellectual property worth millions of dollars. We've developed applications, training protocols, and implementation strategies that are being licensed by school districts and technology companies. Brooke was shaking her head slowly, trying to reconcile this information with her assumptions about my limited career prospects. $3 million in federal grants for educational technology you developed? That's impossible. We would have known about something that significant. Mitchell resumed Dad's letter, which answered their questions with devastating precision. I hired private investigators to conduct a comprehensive analysis of Emily's professional activities approximately 1 year ago, he had written. The resulting report documented achievements that far exceed anything her siblings have accomplished in terms of innovation, social impact, and potential for transforming entire industries. The letter included specific details about my work that only extensive investigation could have revealed. Dad knew about my late-night programming sessions, my weekend trips to conferences, and my collaborations with university researchers interested in licensing our educational applications. Emily has demonstrated that she doesn't need the Thompson family name or resources to create extraordinary value, Dad continued. She has built something meaningful using her own intelligence, creativity, and commitment to principles I have come to respect more deeply than pure profit maximization. Victoria finally found her voice, though it carried none of its usual authority. Richard never mentioned any investigation. He never said anything about changing his succession plans based on some secret evaluation of our choices. Dad was watching us, I said quietly, the reality finally sinking in. All those family dinners where he seemed to disapprove of my work, he was actually conducting his own research into what I was really accomplishing. The letter's conclusion revealed Dad's ultimate reasoning for the inheritance distribution. Thomson Communications requires leadership that can combine technological innovation with social responsibility. Emily has proven she possesses both the technical competence and the ethical commitment necessary to transform our family business into something that creates genuine value for the communities we serve. Marcus looked across the table at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not dismissal or condescension, but recognition that he was looking at someone whose achievements he was only beginning to understand. Emily, I don't even know who you are. For 8 years, I thought you were wasting your education on an idealistic career that would never amount to anything significant. The woman you all thought was throwing away her potential has actually built something that demonstrates the future of business innovation. She has proven that success can serve both financial sustainability and social benefit simultaneously. As Mitchell set down the letter, the silence in the conference room was different from the shocked quiet that had followed the inheritance announcement. This was the stillness of people processing not just unexpected information, but a fundamental reorganization of their understanding about achievement, worth, and family relationships. The daughter they had pitied as the family disappointment had been secretly recognized as the family's greatest innovator. The inheritance that had seemed like inexplicable favoritism was actually the result of careful evaluation and strategic thinking that none of them had suspected. But the full implications of this transformation were still developing, and the conversations that would reshape our family dynamics were just beginning. The weeks following the will reading transformed our family dynamics in ways none of us could have anticipated. The initial shock and disbelief gradually evolved into a complex process of relationship reconstruction as everyone struggled to understand their new roles within the radically altered Thompson family hierarchy. Marcus took a leave of absence from Thompson Communications immediately after learning about the inheritance distribution, traveling to Colorado with Jennifer and their daughters to process what he described as a complete reevaluation of everything he thought he understood about success and family expectations. When he returned 3 weeks later, he requested a meeting that would surprise me with its humility and introspection. "Emily," he said, settling into the visitor's chair in what had been Dad's corner office on the 38th floor of Thompson Communications headquarters. "I need to understand what you've built and how I might contribute to it, rather than trying to impose my own vision." The office itself had been carefully preserved exactly as Dad had left it, from the architectural drawings covering the walls to the family photographs arranged on his mahogany desk. But the view from his chair now belonged to me, along with the responsibility for every decision that would shape the company's future direction and the lives of the 340 employees who depended on Thompson Communications for their livelihoods. Marcus had spent his time in Colorado researching educational technology, community development strategies, and innovative business models that combined profit generation with social impact. His natural analytical abilities, previously focused on optimizing telecommunications infrastructure for maximum efficiency, were now directed toward understanding how my educational innovations might inform Thompson Communications' evolution. "I've been studying your adaptive learning protocol," he continued, spreading printouts of research papers and case studies across the conference table. "I think I'm beginning to understand why Dad saw connections between your work and the future of our business that I completely missed." His analysis was characteristically thorough, identifying specific ways that the personalized, community-centered approaches I had developed for education could revolutionize how telecommunications companies served their customers. "The manufacturing company in Rockford doesn't need the same telecommunications infrastructure as the community health center in Pilsen," Marcus explained, his enthusiasm growing as he outlined his findings. "But we've been selling both of them variations of the same basic service package because that's more efficient for us, not because it's more effective for them." His insights revealed a sophisticated understanding of how adaptive systems thinking could transform traditional business models. The same principles that made my educational protocols effective for diverse learners could make Thompson Communications more valuable to clients with varying technological needs, geographical constraints, and budget limitations. But Marcus's transformation went beyond professional interests to genuine personal growth. The brother who had once measured worth primarily through financial metrics was now asking questions about community impact, employee satisfaction, and long-term sustainability that demonstrated a fundamental shift in his values and priorities. "I want to learn how to apply my technical skills to projects that actually matter," he said, his voice carrying a vulnerability I had never heard before. "I want to understand why Dad concluded that your approach to innovation was more valuable than my experience with conventional business operations." I found myself appreciating Marcus's intellectual honesty and willingness to acknowledge the limitations of his previous worldview. The competitive dynamics that had characterized our sibling relationship for decades were being replaced by something approaching genuine collaboration as we explored how his operational expertise might enhance the educational technology initiatives I had developed. Brooke's evolution followed a different trajectory, but proved equally profound. Her initial response to the inheritance announcement was anger and resentment, but this gradually transformed into curiosity about the marketing and communication strategies that had allowed my education work to gain national recognition without any family awareness or support. "How did you build relationships with federal agencies, university researchers, and technology companies while working as an elementary school teacher?"
she asked during one of our weekly coffee meetings at a cafe near Lincoln Elementary. I've been trying to expand Thomson Communications' market reach, but I've never achieved the kind of institutional recognition your education work has received. Brooke's marketing expertise provided valuable insights into how my educational innovations could be scaled more effectively. Her understanding of brand development, stakeholder engagement, and communication strategies could accelerate the adoption of adaptive learning protocols by school districts and education technology companies nationwide. But more importantly, her questions about my community building approach challenged her to reconsider the purpose and methods of marketing itself. Instead of viewing customers as targets for persuasion, she began exploring how marketing could serve educational goals by connecting educators, researchers, and policymakers around shared commitments to student success. Your work succeeds because it actually solves problems that educators face every day, Brooke observed, reviewing case studies from our pilot programs. Traditional marketing tries to create demand for products that may or may not address real needs. But you built demand by demonstrating solutions that teachers and students were desperate to find.
Her analysis led to innovative strategies for expanding educational technology adoption through community engagement rather than conventional advertising. Instead of purchasing promotional campaigns that interrupted educators' attention, we could create professional development opportunities that allowed teachers to experience our methods directly while building networks of practitioners who could support each other's implementation efforts. Brooke's transformation was perhaps most evident in her approach to her own children's education. She began volunteering at their elementary school, applying her marketing skills to fundraising efforts while learning about the daily challenges facing public educators. Her involvement revealed educational inequities she had never noticed, despite living in one of Chicago's most affluent suburbs. Emily, I had no idea that schools in different neighborhoods could be so dramatically different in terms of resources and support, she said after visiting Lincoln Elementary to observe our pilot program implementation. My children's school has art teachers, music programs, and technology labs that your students can't access. That's not fair, and it's not good for any of our communities. Her growing awareness of educational inequality motivated her to develop marketing campaigns that could raise awareness about resource disparities while building support for innovative approaches that served all students effectively. Her professional skills were being redirected from promoting luxury services to advancing social equity. Victoria's adjustment to the new family dynamics required the most dramatic personal transformation. Her role as the family's social representative and philanthropic coordinator had been built on assumptions about Thomson family wealth and influence that no longer applied in the same ways. Initially, she struggled with the social implications of the inheritance reversal. Chicago's elite circles operated according to carefully maintained hierarchies, and Victoria's position within those networks had been based on her marriage to Richard Thomson and her anticipated role as matriarch of a telecommunications empire. The revelation that the empire's control had passed to the daughter everyone considered a well-meaning failure created awkward social complications that Victoria had to navigate carefully. But her marketing background and understanding of high society dynamics proved valuable for building relationships between my educational work and Chicago's philanthropic community. The same social skills that had elevated Thomson Communications' standing within business networks could connect educational innovators with impact investors and foundation program officers interested in supporting scalable solutions. Emily, your work addresses exactly the kinds of challenges that philanthropists want to support, Victoria explained during one of our monthly strategy meetings at the family home in Barrington Hills. But you've been operating within academic and government circles that don't overlap much with the private philanthropy networks that could accelerate your impact. Victoria began hosting intimate dinner parties that brought together university researchers, education policymakers, and wealthy individuals interested in supporting innovative approaches to educational equity. Her ability to facilitate meaningful connections between people who might not otherwise meet created opportunities for collaboration and funding that pure academic merit couldn't access. These gatherings evolved into quarterly symposiums that attracted national attention from education leaders, technology entrepreneurs, and social impact investors. Victoria's event planning expertise created environments where serious policy discussions could occur alongside relationship building that led to partnership agreements and funding commitments. But perhaps most significantly, Victoria's deepening involvement with educational equity issues challenged her to examine her own assumptions about merit, opportunity, and social responsibility. Her charity work had previously focused on organizations that served affluent donors' networking interests, rather than addressing the most pressing needs facing vulnerable populations. I've been supporting organizations that make affluent people feel good about their philanthropy, she admitted during one particularly honest conversation about the effectiveness of traditional charitable giving. But I haven't been asking whether our donations actually create meaningful change for the people who need help most. The transformation of Thomson Communications itself required careful planning and gradual implementation to maintain business stability while incorporating the community-centered approaches that had made my educational work successful. The company's 340 employees had built their careers around conventional telecommunications contracting, and sudden changes in business philosophy could create confusion and resistance that might undermine both morale and performance. I spent months meeting with department heads, project managers, and frontline technicians to understand their perspectives on the company's strengths, challenges, and opportunities for evolution. These conversations revealed that many employees had been frustrated by the narrow focus on profit maximization that prevented them from developing more innovative solutions for clients' communication needs. We know how to solve problems that our customers don't even realize they have, explained Sarah Chen, a senior systems engineer who had been with Thomson Communications for 12 years. But we're not encouraged to propose comprehensive solutions because they're more complex to implement and harder to price standardly. Her insights reflected broader employee interest in applying their technical expertise to projects that created genuine value rather than simply maximizing billing hours. The same creative problem-solving abilities that made Thomson Communications successful in telecommunications infrastructure could address community development challenges, educational technology needs, and social service delivery improvements. The integration of educational technology development with telecommunication services created unprecedented opportunities for innovation and market differentiation. School districts needed sophisticated communication systems that could support remote learning, community engagement, and administrative efficiency. Community organizations required technology solutions that could connect residents with resources, services, and civic participation opportunities. By the 6-month anniversary of Dad's death, Thomson Communications had launched 3 pilot programs that combined telecommunications infrastructure with educational technology support. These projects served as laboratories for developing new business models while demonstrating the kind of community-centered innovation that Dad had envisioned when he transferred company control to me. The financial results exceeded all projections. Clients were willing to pay premium rates for customized solutions that addressed their specific challenges rather than generic service packages. Employee satisfaction increased dramatically as teams worked on projects that created visible community benefits. Industry recognition positioned Thomson Communications as a pioneer in socially responsible business practices that generated both profit and positive impact. But the most profound change was in our family's understanding of what legacy actually meant. Dad had built a successful business empire, but his final act was to entrust that empire to the daughter who had demonstrated that commercial success and community benefit could be achieved simultaneously. The Thomson family was no longer defined by wealth accumulation and social status advancement, but by our commitment to using business success as a tool for addressing educational inequality and community development challenges that affected millions of families throughout the country. The invitation arrived on cream-colored stationery bearing the seal of Harvard Business School, requesting my participation as the keynote speaker for their annual Leadership Innovation Summit. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same institution where my siblings had earned their MBAs was now seeking insights from the family member they had once considered professionally irrelevant. But this invitation represented something far more significant than personal vindication. The summit's theme, Redefining Success in the 21st Century, reflected a fundamental shift in how America's most prestigious business institutions were thinking about leadership, innovation, and the relationship between profit and purpose. 3 years had passed since Dad's funeral, and the transformation of both my family and Thomson Communications had exceeded every projection we had dared to imagine. The company that Marcus had expected to inherit as a traditional telecommunications contractor had evolved into something unprecedented, a hybrid enterprise that generated substantial profits while pioneering community-centered business models that were being studied by corporations throughout the world. The Harvard presentation would be my opportunity to share what we had learned about building sustainable success that served both shareholders and communities. But first, I needed to understand how far we had actually come from those early days when my teaching career was dismissed as noble but impractical idealism. Thomson Communications now employed over 800 people across 12 states with annual revenues approaching $400 million. But unlike traditional corporate expansion that prioritized market penetration and cost efficiency, our growth had been guided by principles borrowed from educational innovation, adaptive strategies that responded to local community needs while maintaining systematic approaches that could be scaled effectively. Our telecommunications services had evolved beyond basic infrastructure installation to comprehensive community development support that integrated technology solutions with social services, educational programs, and economic development initiatives. When we contracted with a rural county in Iowa to upgrade their broadband infrastructure, we also partnered with local schools to implement adaptive learning programs and collaborated with agricultural cooperatives to develop precision farming technologies that increased both productivity and environmental sustainability. The financial results were remarkable. Client retention rates exceeded 95% because our services created genuine value rather than simply meeting minimal technical requirements. Employee satisfaction surveys showed unprecedented levels of engagement because teams worked on projects that produced visible community benefits alongside profitable outcomes. Industry analysts were beginning to refer to the Thomson model as a new paradigm for social responsibility that generated superior returns precisely because it prioritized stakeholder value over shareholder profit maximization. But the most profound changes had occurred within our family relationships as each member discovered ways to contribute their unique expertise to enterprises that mattered more than personal advancement or financial accumulation. Marcus had completed his master's degree in educational leadership from Northwestern, fulfilling Dad's inheritance requirement, while genuinely transforming his understanding of effective management and organizational development. His thesis research on collaborative leadership and community-centered businesses had been published in Harvard Business Review and was being cited by management consultants working with corporations attempting to implement similar approaches. "Emily," he said during our monthly family strategy meeting at the Barrington Hills house, "I never understood why Dad required me to study education until I realized that teaching and business leadership require exactly the same skills. Creating environments where people can develop their potential while working together to achieve shared goals." His insights had revolutionized Thomson Communications' internal operations. Instead of traditional hierarchical management that relied on top-down directives and performance evaluations based on individual competition, Marcus had implemented collaborative structures that encouraged innovation, cross-departmental cooperation, and professional development that served both company needs and employee aspirations. The results included dramatically reduced turnover rates, increased productivity measurements,
and innovation metrics that positioned Thomson Communications as one of the most desirable employers in the telecommunications industry. But more importantly, Marcus had discovered that management approaches based on educational principles created workplace cultures that attracted and retained talented professionals who wanted their careers to contribute to meaningful social impact. Brooke's evolution had been equally dramatic. Her marketing expertise was now focused on building authentic relationships between Thomson Communications and the communities we served, rather than persuading customers to purchase services they might not need. Her campaigns highlighted genuine community benefits and invited collaboration rather than promoting corporate brand recognition. Traditional marketing treats customers as targets for persuasion, she explained during a presentation to the Chicago Marketing Association that had attracted national attention from business publications. But community-centered marketing treats customers as partners in creating solutions that serve their actual needs and priorities. Her approach had generated unprecedented customer loyalty and word-of-mouth referrals that reduced advertising costs while increasing contract values. More significantly, her marketing strategies had been adopted by dozens of other companies seeking to build authentic community relationships that enhanced, rather than exploited, local social and economic networks. Brooke's work had earned recognition from the American Marketing Association as representing the future of ethical business promotion, and she was regularly invited to speak at conferences about sustainable marketing practices that built community wealth rather than extracting it for corporate benefit. Victoria's transformation had perhaps been the most surprising. Her social connections and event planning expertise had evolved into sophisticated networks that connected community organizations, educational institutions, and business leaders around shared commitments to regional development that served all stakeholders effectively. The quarterly symposiums she organized at our family home have become influential gatherings where mayors, school superintendents, nonprofit directors, and business executives collaborated on initiatives that addressed housing, education, healthcare, and economic development challenges through integrated approaches that traditional sector boundaries had previously prevented. Victoria has created something unprecedented, noted Dr. Rebecca Chen from the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy during one symposium focused on rural broadband expansion. These aren't networking events where people exchange business cards. They're genuine collaboration laboratories where different sectors work together to solve complex problems that no single organization could address independently. The symposiums had generated partnership agreements that resulted in over $60 million in coordinated investment across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Projects included affordable housing developments with integrated technology infrastructure, educational facilities that served as community centers, and healthcare systems that utilized telecommunications innovations to extend services to underserved populations. But the most remarkable change had been in Victoria's understanding of her own capabilities and interests. The woman who had once focused primarily on maintaining social status through philanthropic activities was now developing policy proposals and advocacy strategies that addressed systemic challenges affecting rural and urban communities throughout the Midwest. The transformation of Thomson Communications had attracted attention from business researchers, policy analysts, and social entrepreneurs, interested in understanding how traditional corporations could evolve to serve broader purposes without sacrificing financial sustainability or competitive effectiveness. The Harvard Business School case study that would be featured during my keynote presentation had been developed through 6 months of interviews, financial analysis, and operational assessment conducted by faculty members and graduate students who wanted to understand the mechanisms that enabled our success. The Thomson Communications model challenges fundamental assumptions about trade-offs between profit and purpose, explained Professor David Martinez, who had led the case study development team. Most corporate social responsibility initiatives require companies to sacrifice short-term profits for long-term reputation benefits, but Thomson has demonstrated superior financial performance precisely because their community-centered approaches create more value for all stakeholders. The case study documented how community engagement strategies reduced operational costs, enhanced innovation capabilities, and generated customer loyalty that traditional marketing expenditures couldn't achieve. Our employee retention rates were 30% higher than industry averages, reducing recruitment and training costs while maintaining institutional knowledge that improved service quality and operational efficiency. Customer satisfaction metrics exceeded those of competitors, charging premium prices for basic services because our adaptive approaches address specific local needs rather than offering standardized packages that required customers to adjust their requirements to fit our capabilities.
But the financial analysis revealed something even more significant. Thomson Communications' profit margins had increased consistently since implementing community-centered business practices, contradicting conventional wisdom that suggested ethical business practices required accepting reduced profitability. Community engagement creates competitive advantages that traditional business models can't replicate, I explained during the Harvard presentation, displaying financial comparisons that demonstrated our superior performance across multiple metrics. When local relationships generate customer loyalty, employee satisfaction, and innovation opportunities, the resulting business outcomes exceed what pure market competition can achieve. The Harvard audience included CEOs, management consultants, and MBA students who represented the next generation of business leadership. Their questions revealed genuine interest in understanding how community-centered approaches could be implemented in other industries and geographical contexts. The telecommunications industry had provided an ideal laboratory for testing these concepts because infrastructure projects inherently affected entire communities and required extensive local cooperation for successful implementation. But the principles we had developed could be adapted to healthcare, education, manufacturing, and service industries that needed authentic community relationships to achieve optimal outcomes. The key insight, I continued, responding to questions about replication and scalability, is that sustainable business success requires creating value for all stakeholders, rather than extracting maximum value for shareholders. This isn't charity or corporate social responsibility. It's strategic thinking that recognizes interdependence between business prosperity and community well-being. The presentation included case studies from our recent projects that demonstrated how community-centered approaches generated solutions that pure market analysis couldn't identify. A telecommunications upgrade in rural Wisconsin had revealed opportunities for telemedicine services that connected isolated elderly residents with healthcare providers, creating new revenue streams while addressing genuine social needs. An educational technology installation in urban Milwaukee had led to partnerships with community organizations that provided job training and small business development services, expanding our customer base while contributing to local economic development that benefited everyone in the region. But perhaps the most compelling example involved our recent expansion into environmental sustainability consulting, where telecommunications infrastructure expertise was being applied to renewable energy projects and climate adaptation strategies that generated both profits and measurable environmental benefits. Thomson Communications has become a model for what business scholars are calling regenerative capitalism, noted Professor Martinez during the panel discussion that followed my presentation. Instead of extracting value from communities and environments, they're demonstrating how corporations can strengthen the social and ecological systems that support long-term prosperity. The Harvard Symposium concluded with breakout sessions where business leaders explored practical strategies for implementing community-centered approaches within their own organizations and industries. The enthusiasm and concrete planning that emerged from these discussions suggested that Thomson Communications represented an early example of business evolution that would accelerate rapidly as more corporations recognize the competitive advantages of authentic stakeholder engagement. But the most meaningful response came from the MBA students who approached me after the formal presentations ended. These future business leaders were grappling with questions about how to build careers that generated both financial success and positive social impact, particularly as they witnessed growing public skepticism about corporate behavior and business ethics. Miss Thompson, said Jennifer Liu, a second-year MBA student from California, your family's story demonstrates that we don't have to choose between financial success and community service. Could you talk about how young professionals can apply these principles even as they're working for traditional corporations that haven't adopted community-centered approaches?
Her question reflected broader generational changes in how emerging professionals thought about career success and social responsibility. Surveys indicated that over 70% of recent graduates preferred working for organizations that demonstrated genuine commitment to environmental and social impact, even if alternative positions offered higher starting salaries. The principles that guide Thomson Communications can be applied at any scale, I replied, thinking about my own journey from individual classroom innovation to systematic business transformation. Community-centered thinking begins with asking how your work can create value for others rather than just advancing your own career or generating profits for your employer. The conversation that followed revealed remarkable creativity and determination among students who were committed to building business careers that served broader purposes than traditional success metrics typically measured. Their ideas included social impact consulting, sustainable technology development, community-centered marketing, and financial services that supported local wealth building rather than extracting capital for distant shareholders. These young professionals represented the future of American business leadership, and their enthusiasm for community-centered approaches suggested that the Thomson model was part of a broader transformation in how society thought about the relationship between economic success and social responsibility.
As I flew back to Chicago from the Harvard Symposium, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought our family from the public humiliation of Dad's funeral to national recognition for pioneering business practices that demonstrated sustainable alternatives to traditional corporate behavior. The daughter who had been dismissed as idealistic for choosing teaching over telecommunications had become a business leader whose innovations were being studied by the country's most prestigious institutions. But the real victory wasn't personal vindication or professional recognition. It was the knowledge that thousands of employees, customers, and community members had benefited from approaches that proved business success and social impact could be achieved simultaneously. The inheritance that had initially shocked everyone with its unexpected distribution had provided the resources necessary to demonstrate that meaningful work creates its own validation, regardless of external recognition or approval. The Thomson family had learned that true legacy isn't measured through accumulated wealth or individual achievement, but through the sustainable systems we create that continue generating positive impact long after our personal contributions are forgotten. Dad's final gift hadn't just been financial assets or business control. It had been the opportunity to discover what we could accomplish when we stopped competing for approval and started collaborating to create something worthy of the opportunities we had been given. The family hierarchy that had once seemed so important had been replaced by collaborative relationships that multiplied rather than divided our individual capabilities. Looking toward the future, Thomson Communications would continue expanding nationally while maintaining the community-centered principles that had made our success sustainable and meaningful. The business model we had developed was already being adapted by companies throughout North America, and international organizations were beginning to explore how similar approaches might address development challenges in regions where traditional corporate practices had failed to generate broad-based prosperity. But perhaps most importantly, we had proven that the false choice between financial success and social responsibility was based on limited thinking about what business could accomplish when guided by genuine commitment to community benefit alongside sustainable profitability. The woman who had once been called a failure for rejecting predetermined paths of family business success was now leading initiatives that demonstrated how inherited advantages could be transformed into tools for expanding opportunity rather than concentrating privilege. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.